So I'm super excited for Evan's speech here in a minute. But I guess it is almost noon, isn't it? I'll just jump in. I guess this is it. So really, I just want to introduce myself real quickly. And I told you a little bit about what we're doing. My name's Todd Brinkman. I started a company called Virtual Reality for Main Street. And I was fortunate enough to be able to write 3 books last year in virtual reality about virtual reality departments, what that looks like, and virtual reality prayers, which happens to be my faith, and what is a VR prison ministry, what is a VR homeless ministry, to create that 3rd book that was done just a few months ago. And now I'm in the world of trying to help people on Main Street actually navigate our new tools. So I'm excited for all this to be there. And really, I take a stand for people on Main Street because I don't want them to be left behind. A lot of them really are good people, but for some reason they're not here. And just to keep pushing them to bring them into the conversation. So, they even have a voice and can help us navigate all of our new tools. And that's who I am. So I'm really, really glad you're all here. And the reason we started Chamber Innovators was really with Rick Wilson at the Chamber last year in East County, San Diego. And we navigated this thing where we had weekly speakers of innovation and all these new things. And it went well. We got a lot of city government and people talking about the cool things we're doing. And we decided to open it up to other chambers in San Diego and just see where it went, see if there's an appetite for people on Main Street learning about innovation. So that's what Chamber Innovation is, Chamber Innovators. And we're just going to explore what's possible as even we look to maybe work with other chambers around the country to see where this goes, because they may not have people in their community that can work on innovation. And that's what we're going to try to do as a team. So all of you and leaders in your industries, it's fun. This is a community thing. We're not here to make money in this call. It's just an idea of where we can really add value to our local leaders like Kathy, because they're working a million miles an hour to serve their community, and they may not know or have the tools to talk about innovation. So we're like their vehicle to talk to new members. So when they have new members, they can say, hey, we do innovative things, and we want to fill that void for them. So you're welcome to join us as a group. And I'm so excited that Evan's here today. And Evan, we've known each other for just a little while, but I've learned to really appreciate your work. And as Evan talked about before, his name is Evan Sittler. He's the co-founder and CEO of XpertVR. And today we're going to really talk about virtual reality and what's possible in the world of research, and a little bit about Evan. As the lead of business and technological development, Evan Sittler has extensive experience in the latest VR equipment, software, and 360 filming and editing and software. And like we just talked about, Evan's going to be talking about how we can use these new tools to really unleash our ability to do research. And Evan's going to be talking a little bit of an overview and then go into a couple of case studies as we jump in. So Evan, I made you the co-host, so hopefully you can share your screen. But here you go. Yeah. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Todd. I'm really excited to be here presenting, and happy that it's being recorded as well, so that anybody that can't make it can watch it, or everybody else can rewatch it or find parts that they found interesting. And yeah, definitely, as Todd mentioned, I know a little bit of, or a lot of everything in the virtual reality space. So I'm focusing on research, but definitely want to hopefully leave some time for questions. So if you have questions that are outside of the VR research area, happy to jump on those as well. So I'll just share my screen here. All right, can you see that? Perfect. All right, loading up. There we go. All right, so yeah, want to present today on the radical new ways to conduct research, and obviously focusing on virtual reality and extended reality. So before we get into it, quick agenda. I wanted to talk about who we are as XpertVR and my company, then a little XR background. It seems like most people here have some experience with virtual reality and augmented reality and XR, but I always like to quickly go through that in case anybody doesn't know the acronyms that I'm saying. And then today's benefits, use cases, some research that we've done with XR, and then what you kind of need if you are doing research in XR with the different technology, other things you have to plan for. And like I said, hopefully lots of time for questions and discussion as well. So starting off, who is XpertVR? So we're based outside of Niagara Falls, Ontario, here in Canada. Team of 12 of us now, and we've been in the virtual reality space for almost 5 years now. doing all kinds of different projects, but over the past 2 years, really focusing in on research and training. And with that, we've worked with large brands, research houses, and all kinds of different academic institutions as well. So yeah, talking about the acronyms that I might say throughout this presentation, the 4 main ones are VR, AR, MR, and XR. So starting off, VR, virtual reality. So you're fully immersed in a virtual world. Everything you look at and touch and feel is virtual. Then on the kind of opposite side of the spectrum would be AR or augmented reality, where you can see a virtual representation of something inside of the real world, but you can't really interact with it, or at least that's how I kind of put it. And then mixed reality is where you kind of combine the two a little bit more, where you can see a layer of the augmented world on top of your real world, but you can interact with it. So if there's a ball on a table that's a hologram or a 3D model, you can hit it with your real hand and it will roll off the table and fall down and have that real world physics. And then XR, I think a lot of people have different names for how they describe XR, but I just call it extended reality. And it's basically the encompassing term that encompasses VR, AR, and MR, and all the related technologies. So getting into it, like I said, I think a lot of you know about VR, so I've gotten over these misconceptions, but I know in the virtual world, a lot of people think that VR is poor quality. You're going to get motion sickness when you go through a simulation, or that the headset's huge, like these ones on the right there, and very clunky, or that VR is for gamers and geeks, and that's kind of the one main use case for it. But it couldn't be farther from the truth, especially over the past couple of years. The quality of headsets, lots of headsets around have gotten up to 8K quality, and kind of the average is becoming around that 4 or 5K. So definitely great quality. And if simulations are built properly for those headsets, you're not going to get motion sickness. Sometimes if it's a simulation where you have to do a lot of movement, you can still get motion sickness, and you have to get your VR legs. So I always recommend, if you're trying VR for the first time, try like a simple experience, not a roller coaster or a fighting game where you're running around everywhere, something that you're just walking around and experiencing the virtual world. And then clunky headsets, couldn't be farther from the truth. There's headsets now that I'll get into that you don't need a computer to hook them up to. They're less than £1. They're balanced really well, so you don't hardly feel them on your head. And then VR for gamers and geeks, I think these stats are actually a year or so old now. But I think it was 2019 that $11.8 billion was spent in enterprise VR and $7 billion in the consumer space. So definitely a lot of money and a lot of experiences going on in all kinds of other aspects of the virtual reality world. So now narrowing in on the research side of things, there's 3 main problems that we've kind of seen researchers and people using VR for research that have been having, and why they've moved towards, hi Joe, nice to see you, towards the using VR for research first. Most traditional methods, whether it be focus groups, questionnaires, or other setups for research, you get a lot of great quantitative data that you can go through and analyze, and you can see where those numbers came from, but not a lot of qualitative data of like, why did somebody pick that up versus picking up another product in a consumer behavior study, or what emotions were they feeling when they were going through this simulation or through this research study. Secondly, unable to conduct research studies due to COVID-19. That's been a huge thing the past year. You can't bring people into your research lab to do studies. And obviously, as things open back up, that's becoming less and less of a problem, but it's still an issue to get a diverse panel of people to do a research study. When you're, especially for academic institutions, you're bringing in students, so it's all students that are doing your research study, or even if you're a research house that can bring in people with diverse backgrounds, they're still from one geographic location. So you might not be getting the research results that really show what the country or the world opinion is on whatever you're trying to research. And then lastly, conducting complex experiments can be hard to do when there's something that might harm a research participant, or there's a lot of resources that go into conducting a research study. So with virtual reality, you can make sure people aren't getting harmed, and then it's something that you can do over and over again, so you're not wasting resources. I'll get into that a little bit more. So with that, benefits of VR that we've seen, and our clients and people that we work with have seen, is first, just how highly customizable virtual reality worlds and even augmented reality simulations can be. You can have avatars that you can have full interactions with, that have branch conversations depending on how you take the conversation, kind of like in this picture here. This is more of like a testing simulation, but you can see how a question might be asked, and then you have multiple answers, and then you branch that way. Or you can even add on AI. So there's voice analysis, and then the AI responds depending on the question you ask, and giving you lots of feedback as you're going through that. You can also isolate specific variables. So you're putting somebody into a headset, so there's no distractions around them, and you can be researching one exact item inside of an environment, or the whole environment, and have a lot of room to play there. Like I mentioned, like we'll get into a little bit more, there's so much more data that you can collect and analyze inside of these virtual worlds. And overall, it's just much more immersive and engaging, and feels like the real world as somebody's going through. So they're not getting distracted by things. They're not thinking that they're in a lab environment. They feel like they're in this virtual world that feels like it's a real world. And a kind of a great point that the University of Toronto found in some of their research was that going through virtual worlds and these 3D animations, it resonated 21 days longer than static images or text. So this is something that people are experiencing, and because they're experiencing that, it really gets embedded deep inside their brain of the experience they went through, and feeling like it was a realistic experience. So again, these stats are a little old too. I should be updating these ones. I should find some updated ones, but it's just like a nice spreadsheet here. But you can just see how much the VR industry has been growing, and this is definitely a concern a lot of people have, having to pay for VR equipment, or just trying out VR for the first time. It's like, is this just really a fad thing? Is this something that's going to pass? And you can see even 4 years ago how much the industry was growing, and then seeing where it's predicted that the industry will be in 2 years. And this is just in the education space. So growing exponentially every year, and continuing to expand into new industries. So now getting into a couple research studies that we've run, and examples of research we've done at XpertVR. First, we've worked with Brock University. They're based in St. Catharines here in Ontario, Canada, just outside Niagara Falls, where we're located. And they've built this amazing R3CL lab. So it's reality times 3 consumer lab. And here they have virtual reality, augmented reality, and physical reality. So you can run a study where somebody's fully immersed in a virtual world, or where they're just interacting with a couple objects using augmented reality and seeing how that changes their perception, all the way to just running a physical research. So as an example of something they're doing with this environment, is they have people go into a virtual liquor store, because this was sponsored by the wine space or the wine industry here in Niagara. They have people go into a liquor store, and they can see how they're interacting with the whole environment. And then they can pull them out of that virtual environment and just have a bottle of wine in front of them, and they scan it with their augmented reality glasses and can change the label. So they're seeing first how they shop in a store, then how they react to specific labels and just changing in the words of labels, then to a physical consumer space, where they're seeing how do people dine in a restaurant, and depending on what the environment looks like, the smells in the air and things along those lines, what wine do they choose, or what drink do they choose in general. So with this, we've done a bunch of work on consulting on the hardware and development, as well as I'll get into it soon, just like the conversion of doing the research in the lab to how that lab can support online and remote research as well. There's the video. Okay. So in in the research space, one of the biggest areas that have been using virtual reality is consumer behavior. Sorry if this video is a little choppy. I know it's sometimes bad over Zoom. Has been in this consumer behavior space. So this is one of the, you'll see a couple of different environments that we've created for consumer behavior. And it's a great environment because you can change things on the fly. You can change the products that are on shelves, the layout of the store, the ads that are in the store, all the colors of the walls and things along those lines, and seeing how all of these different things can change somebody's perception of their shopping experience. And this is something that up until today would cost like $100,000 to run one research study with a research house. And I have some like pricing examples of research we've done and research other people are doing later on. But you'll see like you can get down to even like the $5,000 range with these types of studies. So it makes it a lot easier for smaller retailers and Main Street retailers to create these environments and run these research studies. Oh, there we go. And then we were talking a little bit before the presentation about empathy in virtual reality and how you can research so many other things beyond just consumer behavior. And this might be interesting to those in the public space here. This is a research study that we ran looking at how people's perception changes about the future of ocean life and new climate change policies being put into place. So the video you're seeing is the dystopian future, and then behind me you can see the utopian future of what ocean life may look like in 2050. And by going through these simulations and listening to the dialogue in them and having some interactions, we were able to see how going through either the utopian, the dystopian, or just reading text, how those three different scenarios change people's perceptions about climate change policies and evoking emotions. And we've even used these types of environments for office harassment and ethics research as well. So putting people through different office environments and having them have conversations with colleagues and bosses and managers, and seeing how these bosses and colleagues interact with each other, how it changes if the culture of the organization, whether it's ethical, whether it's there's harassment that might be happening and things along those lines. So consumer behavior is definitely a huge part of the research in virtual reality, but there's so many other nuances and things that you can study. So really interesting there. So from here, there's a lot of things you need to consider. Obviously, virtual reality is a completely different ball game, moving away from traditional research or just getting into research for the first time. So there's a few things here that I wrote down to consider when you're getting into the research space. First and foremost, whether you're a publicly funded academic institution or you're an enterprise, you're still going to need to write a grant or proposal to the federal government or to your boss to try and get the funding to run this research. So you want to really consider all of these things right off the top to make sure that that proposal includes everything that you might need when you're doing your research. As well as making sure that you're consulting with the people that can give you the technical knowledge to make sure that these grants and proposals are written properly. Then from there, you're going to need to look at software development. There's so many different options of ways you can go. You can hire an in-house team, you can hire contractors, you can use off-the-shelf solutions. So seeing which one's going to be best for you and weighing all the pros and cons of those is going to be huge, because that's going to be the main thing that that changes how people react to your research. From there, and knowing that information, you're going to be looking at the timeline and cost, obviously. So you're first considering what your timeline is, and then seeing if the option that you're looking at for software development is going to fit inside that timeline. Some very sophisticated VR simulations may take a year to build, where other ones may take a couple of weeks or a month, or there's an off-the-shelf one that you buy and it's ready to go. So making sure that those types of things are fitting in the timeline as well as the cost that you have set out. Similarly, going into that is the hardware that you're using, if you're sourcing hardware, as well as making sure that that hardware is clean. Obviously, right now with COVID and with just wary of future pandemics and things, everybody, if you're exchanging hardware and having lots of people using the same hardware, you want to make sure that it's cleaned properly and that that you're not passing any diseases or anything as people go through these simulations. From there, making sure that you have a full plan for running the research studies. Lots of people, they're like, VR, it's perfect. You just bring somebody in, you put the headset on, they go through and you get your results. But there's so many other steps that you have from recruiting participants, which I'll get into, to making sure that you have the proper surveys and the proper survey lengths ready for these research, if that's the type of data you're collecting. Making sure that you have the technical skills ready to help if there's any issues while going through the research studies, and making sure that people feel comfortable going into VR and thinking about maybe this is somebody's first time in VR, so you should be setting up kind of like a demo beforehand so that they're used to virtual reality, and then when they go into the research study, they're not like jaw to the ground, just fascinated with the world and not actually giving you the data that you need for your research. And then going into talking about data collection, there's so many different things you can collect in virtual reality from, and I kind of get into this in the hardware portion, but there's everything from just basic surveys and that kind of data to recordings of people going through, to eye tracking, where you can like see very precisely where people were looking in the simulation and what path they took to get to where they were looking, to biofeedback, tracking their heart rate or their brain activity and things along those lines. So knowing what data you want to collect and what you need to make sure that data is collected properly. And then lastly, a huge one is finding the participants, whether that be people coming into your lab, working with people remotely, and making sure that you have the right amount of participants to come in, and the ones in the demographic you're trying to research. So this might be something you do in-house, might be something you hire somebody to recruit people, bring in. There's market research firms. There's all kinds of different ways you can go about this, but finding the one that works best for you is definitely important. And then one that I didn't list here, but I have in the picture, trying to understand what other things you might need outside of the virtual environment. So you might notice here, there's my co-founder, Drew, pretending to drink some wine out of a wine glass we designed. And you'll see there's a curve on the wine glass. And that's because when you're drinking wine in virtual reality, you have a big headset on, so you actually can't tip the glass back. So seeing what items are you going to be interacting it with in this virtual world and how might you need to modify them to make sure that they work with the virtual world. And to do that, we got these wine glasses designed that have the special lip there so you can still drink in the virtual world. So I know I said 5,000 or ish is a price that you can get down to, and I'll get to that. But kind of when you're building a full virtual reality simulation, you're getting it custom made. Here's kind of like the prices that you can look at. And this is around what we charge, but it's also what most of the rest of the industry charges for fully interactive VR simulations. And then obviously through what Todd knows and Dante knows, there's the 360 video, which is a great aspect as well, depending on what you're researching. But yeah, you got that $45,000 to $80,000 range for like a fully interactive simulation that has a custom 3D environment and 3D models, audio and text, some minimum data collection, and probably going to take 1 to 4 months to develop. Then from there, if you have a very sophisticated virtual reality simulation that has avatars that you interact with, maybe some AI inside those avatars. You want full data collection of biometrics and eye tracking and every piece of data that you can think of. Then it's probably going to go up to that $100,000 range and take 5 to 12 months to develop. And then you might also have VR accessories in there, which I'll get into as well. So just before I get into the headset side of things, wanted to kind of differentiate. There's like three different kinds of headsets out there. There's screenless viewers, which are kind of like these. They're a Google Cardboard headset, so they're great to like mail out to people, and they kind of just unfold and you slide your phone in there, and they cost like $1 or $2, depending on how many you're buying in bulk, but they're usually pretty cheap, can have your branding on them and everything. And they were kind of the start of virtual reality and are amazing technology for getting it out to the masses, but you can't really collect too much data there. So that's going to be kind of your best option if you're going for 360 video research studies or marketing promotions. Then from there, you go to standalone headsets. So there's like the Oculus Quest 2 is kind of being the most popular consumer one. Got one behind me here. Great consumer headset. Has some, it's made by Facebook, so there's some Facebook policies you got to mess around with there, but it's still a great headset. And then beyond that, there's Pico and HTC, two brands that have made some really amazing headsets that compete with the Oculus Quest 2. And this is kind of where the VR industry is heading, into these standalone headsets, because of how easy they are to use. And then lastly, tethered headsets. These are headsets that have to be plugged into a computer, and this offers you a lot more power as you're going through a simulation, and you can do a lot more with them. So diving deeper into the standalone headsets, there's the Vive Focus 3 that I mentioned, and then Pico is the other brand that I was talking about. Like I mentioned, these don't require any computer. They don't require any base stations, which are basically these little cameras basically that you put up in the corner of a room that can track a headset's position when you're using the higher end headsets. And so these ones, they use inside out tracking. So they're tracking all of the world from the little cameras that you can see. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but little cameras at the bottom by the nose and around the top there. They're very lightweight, easy to ship or bring around to friend's house, or to very easily transport. The problem with them is they have limited power because they're basically built off of a cell phone processor. So it's not like a very high-end gaming computer that's running these simulations like the tethered headsets. You only have like a cell phone's power. You can still do some very amazing things in these headsets. Some of them even offer eye tracking and those other biometric feedback data, but you are limited a little bit by the power. And a good range here is $400 to $1,300 for these headsets, and 400 is kind of the Oculus end on the consumer side, up to the 1,300 for the Vive, which is the enterprise version. Then getting into the tethered VR, here you can get all of the data you can ever imagine, and very, very precise. The realism that you can create inside of these headsets is as realistic as real life, especially in the Vario headset that I list there. These kinds of headsets are what NASA uses to train, what the military uses to train. This is the highest end that you can get, and it's around that $4,500 range for the highest end, and then $3,000 for HTC. I should have added the $3,000 for the HTC or the Oculus one. That's including a computer. So that's about $2,000 that you'd have to add on to the Vario as well there. And that's because these are tethered headsets, so they have to be plugged into a computer to run properly. And then I've mostly been talking about virtual reality, but to quickly mention augmented reality, there's two main headsets in this space. Again, the Vario as well as the Microsoft HoloLens 2. And you can see the prices there. And these allow you to, like I said, see the virtual world over top of the augmented world. And you can see how precise here the Vario headset is, and their cameras, and how real to life it is. Obviously, that's a real needle and thread that he's threading, but he's able to do that through the cameras in the headset. So showing how realistic the cameras are, and how you can layer the virtual world on top of that. And And again, with the Vario headset, the HoloLens is kind of like hologram, so it's great for some use cases. But with the Vario headset, when you layer that virtual world on top of the real world, it looks just as realistic as the real world, because the cameras and the sensors inside this headset, they track where light is coming from, so they can create reflections on the virtual objects. They know where the ground level is, where a table is, so things can sit on top of it. So many great features through these headsets. But again, the Vario has to be plugged into a computer, whereas the HoloLens allows you to go completely mobile. So almost at the end here, just some other VR accessories. Like Andrew brought up earlier, I have here the Tesla suit in the middle, as well as VR gloves. There's EEG for tracking brain activity, and there's all kinds of other accessories coming out for smell and taste and temperature. And these ones are kind of more in the testing beta stages, but they're things that strap on to the bottom of the headset so you can smell, or they can feel different temperatures, or there's even some glasses that when you drink water from them, they can make the water change taste off of some electrodes that are on your tongue. So really interesting things happening, so you can bring all of the senses into virtual reality and really run these tests as real life. So I keep talking about data collection, and one of the best companies out there, if you're looking for data collection, is Cognitive 3D. They're based out of Vancouver, Canada, and they have basically every kind of data collection you can imagine. Like you can see in the video there, there's the eye tracking side of things. So you have just basic heat maps and opacity maps that show where people are looking, but then you can also see how long were they looking at a specific place. You can rewatch this, you can see the path that they took from one place to another, and all kinds of other things with the eye tracking, as well as all the biofeedback and knowing how somebody was feeling emotionally as they went through the simulation. Were they empathizing with what was going on? Then in some other basic things, just adding surveys throughout the simulation, pre-post, as well as the path that people take through an environment. Did they take the most optimal path? What path did they take in a consumer behavior study to know if they were following the arrows laid out for COVID or things along those lines? So yeah, 3 more slides here. There's basically 3 ways or 2 ways to deliver these types of research studies. One is having a lab in person. So you have your researcher, you got your headset, you give that to a participant, they go through, you monitor them, they give it back to you. You clean it. One of the best ways to clean it is with the system called a clean box, and this uses UV rays that within 1 minute it disinfects the headset completely and is approved by the FDA. And then you can get more people going through. Very similarly, if you wanted to do it remotely, but with your own equipment, you can mail these out. So mailing headsets to people still obviously takes a lot longer going through the cleaning process, but allows you to have a lot more control over the types of accessories and headsets that you're sending out to people. And then the last option is doing everything remotely. So this is something that's still kind of new and still lots of people are working on, including ourselves at XpertVR, and it's completely remote research. So finding people that have headsets at home or the accessories that you need at home, and sending the research software to them. They do it through their headset, send the data back to you, and you reward them for going through that study. So it's something that's a couple places are starting to do more often and doing research on how well this process works. But it's a great way throughout COVID, obviously, but also to get people from more demographic locations and you don't need, or geographic locations, sorry, and you don't need to have all kinds of hardware to send to these people. So with that, something that we've been building at XpertVR is our research access portal. And basically it's an online platform that allows researchers to conduct experimental simulation studies with remote VR headset owners. So as you can see there on the home page, we have launch a study or participate in a study. So participants, they come, they say, yep, I have whatever X headset they have. They fill out their information, where they're located, general household income, hobbies they have, age, really whatever they want to fill out. All they have to fill out is their name and email, so that we can, and what headset they have, so we can contact them that way. And then our researcher goes on and they say, I want to run a research study. I want to have people with this demographic. And then we reach out to the people that that have filled out that correct information. And then they get sent the research study and they participate, and all of the payments handled, all the recruiting of those participants is handled. And we've also built out a bunch of templates so that instead of having to build your VR spaces, you can just use one of the templates that we already have. So this is how we've gotten down ourselves, at least the price, to that $3,000 to $10,000 range. So it's a lot more accessible to new business owners, people on Main Street that can create these studies using one of our environments, send it out, and get the research back or the data back really quickly. So yeah, I'm glad I got through that in under 40 minutes here, so that we have some time for questions. Yeah, again, my name's Evan Sittler. Always happy to connect on LinkedIn to answer any virtual reality questions. And I seriously mean that. I'm not trying to always sell people on our research access portal or anything along those lines. I really want to help promote the virtual reality world and what can be done. So if you have any questions about any aspect of it, I'm happy to answer them and point you in the right direction of people that we know, or websites that you can go to. And yeah, you can check out our website, email info@XpertVR or Evan@XpertVR, I should have put down there, as well as there's my personal phone number and a calendar link that I can send in the chat. So if anybody wants to reach out that way. Yeah.